A little bit about Grant. Grant is the co-founder and CEO of Redstone Residential, a Provo, Utah-based student housing firm that acquires, develops, and manages student and multifamily housing across the United States, Canada, and even Brazil. At Redstone, his primary passion is business development, deal sourcing, and raising capital. Since 2009, Grant has grown Redstone Residential from a small team of 3, managing about 600 beds, to a group of 400 team members operating over 27,000 beds of student housing. In addition to his management experience, Grant is an active investor himself and has acquired or developed $600 million of student housing and multifamily property since 2013. Grant is a graduate of the BYU Marriott School of Business, where he studied finance. Grant, if you don't mind, maybe just take another minute and tell us a little bit more about yourself and your current focus.
You bet. So yeah, thanks for the intro. Founded Redstone Residential in 2009. Small group at that point. We were operating out of a single wide construction trailer when we started, operating 3 apartment complexes. Do you want me to go back right now to kind of the very, very start, or do you want me to give a quick synopsis and then we'll go back? You tell me.
Maybe take us back to when you were making a transition from having a desire to get into the medical field,
okay. Yeah.
and then deciding to make a transition into the multifamily space or real estate space.
Yeah. So, yeah, you mentioned I went to BYU and I studied finance there. What a lot of people don't know is that I actually spent about 3 years as a molecular biology major at BYU. And I had a couple of really interesting moments in 2006. And I was getting married that summer. That's a thing you do at BYU, it seems. And I was all in on medical school, like, you know, and I think that now that I think about it, the reasons that I want to do medical school, I think is, you know, you look at, okay, what are the top earners, right? Like, okay, I've been going to school for X amount of years. Now I'm in college. What should I do? Well, all right, let's look at what's going to maximize my, my potential, right? Financially. And I always had this fantasy growing up of like, oh, I'm gonna earn the right to be lazy, right? Like someday, I've been working really, really hard at school and whatever I'm doing, and someday I'm gonna earn that right to be lazy. And the way to do that, obviously, is commercial real estate. And so I had this plan in my head that I was going to be some successful surgeon or something like that, and that, you know, I'd take a couple of days off, and during those days I'd be building a real estate portfolio. And I was working in a cancer lab at BYU, and I just had this really like ridiculous moment where I think we were spinning down breast cancer cells to do some kind of counts, right? Like how much had grown in a certain amount of time. And so we had some downtime, and I was reading the Wall Street Journal, and I looked around the lab, and other people were doing similar things, waiting for, you know, some type of result. And everyone else was reading Science or Nature or some kind of like, you know, scientific publication. And I just had this moment where I was like, what am I doing? Right? Like, I mean, I think this says it all. And I think someone even said to me, they're like, yeah, you don't belong here. I was like, I kind of hate you guys, right? Like, I just had this moment where I was like, personality wise, I don't think that I necessarily fit into a research or necessarily a medical career. I want to interact with people. And then second, you know, let's just cut to the chase. Let's just figure out how to make commercial real estate work from the get-go. So I actually remember it very vividly. I took the next day, I took my experiment and threw it all in the trash, my breast cancer cells that I was growing. And I went to the advisement center and just said, okay, how screwed am I if I just completely drop this molecular biology thing and start fresh on finance? And luckily the answer was, you know, look, it's not that bad. You know, put in a couple summer semesters, take an online course here or there, and you're totally, you know, caught up. So that was kind of a moment for me, a hard fork in the road, I guess, where I just said, nope, let's do what is really interesting.
Cool. That's awesome. So you
Yeah.
decided to get into to instead drop all the medical stuff and dive right into real estate. Tell me about that process and how we got to where you're at today.
It was tough, actually. In 2006, I made that decision, and I jumped right in. I signed. I really didn't know exactly what to do, right? So I thought, well, let's start with getting a real estate license, right? And now that I think about it, it's like, well, what I'm doing is not necessarily sales or brokerage, but it was a great environment to learn in. So I over the next year, I got a real estate license. I joined the real estate club on campus, started getting exposure to what people were really talking about. I remember being at the real estate club there at BYU, and they said, hey, there's this new group that's starting up. And they would always be talking about different internships, but there's this group that's starting up, and they're called Peak Capital. And hey, they're looking for some interns this summer. And I thought, great, I'll go talk to those guys. And it was really interesting, especially knowing how things have gone for them since. I believe that they've since become a $2 billion acquisition platform. Really, really, really successful, great guys. But in 2007, I started as an acquisition intern for them and just started screening deals, cold calling landowners. And at that time, they didn't necessarily have a focus on multifamily. They were kind of looking at a lot of different product types. So that was great exposure, just to be on the phones, having meetings with people. At the same time, I was trying to sell real estate, and had some really awkward, just like, oh, I can't believe this is happening, just tough experiences early on, where I'm just so glad that I did, right? I really ended up just jumping in with both feet, and saying, all right, I'm going to have all these experiences, and hopefully we find something that a specialty that we really like.
So you did that internship with Peak, where did it go from there?
Yeah, so I ended up actually moving to Texas. I was recruited by a financial services company, and this is probably one of the mistakes that I would say in my career was. Basically, in 2007 and 2008, my senior year at BYU, we watched in slow motion as the U.S. economy collapsed, right? I remember sitting in a macroeconomics class, and the professor was like, hey guys, this is kind of a big deal. Lehman Brothers just, fell apart, and, it was crazy, right? I mean, you're watching the Dow fall 5-6% in a day on some of these occasions. It was pretty bleak, and so I thought I put it on hold, and I said, well, acquisition activity in real estate is pretty much ground to a halt. So I was recruited to a financial services firm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and honestly, they're a great company, and they've since IPO'd, and they were a startup at the time. But it just wasn't for me. I went down there, and it was like, look, we appreciate your creativity, but please shut up, sit at your desk and get your work done. You'll be here from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I was like, dude, I've got some other ideas. I'd love to try out some other things. I think I was just, I wasn't inspired by what we were doing, and I needed a little bit more freedom, right, to kind of run my own show. So at that point, oh, go ahead.
No, please finish.
At that point, I moved back to Utah. This is early 2009. And I called up the Peak guys and said, look, I know that things are slow. Can I just come back and I'll just sit here and I'll do whatever, right? And they said, yeah, that's great. We're actually thinking about starting a management company division. We're actually thinking of a few different things. So come on over. And I did. I sat myself down and we got to work.
Cool. So talk to me about those the early years, maybe the first year or two when you started Redstone Residential.
Yeah. So we ended up actually buying a management company through Peak. And it didn't go as well as I think everyone had hoped. The company that was acquired wasn't loving the new relationship. And I ended up kind of repurchasing the company from Peak, and we ended up separating. And at that point, we became Redstone Residential. We started landing contracts, buying properties. And the early years were pretty lean, right? I mean, we were sitting here literally, this is 2009, 2010, getting it off the ground. And we were really just honestly trying to survive, right? It was a really interesting time, very, very different than the time we're in right now. Right now, people, when they're looking for a job, they're like, oh, I wonder what the flexible work arrangement might be. I wonder if they're going to have like an on-site gym. I wonder if they'll detail my car at work. And then it was like, dude, I wonder if they'll like make payroll, right?
Right.
So it was an interesting time. We really dove right in. We landed some really pretty significant management assignments right off the bat. And I had never come in wanting, property management's a dirty word, right? Most people are not excited by that. And from the very beginning, we had a vision that, look, we were going to take on third-party management assignments because we want to learn, and we want to learn how to become the best. So we did a deep dive into management in those early years. I remember self-implementing Yardi, which is a very common property management platform. I remember learning how to program the reports in Crystal so that I could do custom financial reports for our investors. We did a really, really deep dive, and I think that we developed a great core competency in the operations side. And that's one way that we differentiate ourselves today is, look, guys, at the heart of every real estate investment is the operations, right? A lot of times we're developing or we're acquiring in the same environments as everyone else. And, we're disposing of assets in the same environment as everyone else. It's what happens in between that really, really makes a huge difference. The difference in 1% NOI growth year over year over the whole period of an investment is absolutely massive. And so you have to be on your A game in terms of your operations.
Can you give me a couple good examples of how excellent management and operations can directly impact an asset?
Absolutely. So I have a mentor, and he's a client and a mentor of ours, and he says every now and again, hey, what was the last time that you capitalized $500 a month, right? And so you're saying, okay, if I can save $500 a month somewhere in the operations, right? That's $6,000 a year. And, assuming it's a core asset, we're probably looking at low 5 caps, even high 4 caps. That's $120,000 in value that you create instantly. Now, in an apartment complex, where can you find $500 a month, either on the revenue or the expense side? In tons of places, literally everywhere, right? So some of our home runs that we'd hit originally were, we would go in Utah, historically on the student housing side has lagged behind the national market. What I mean by that is typically the product type is a little bit older, right? When I went to BYU, I was in shared housing, and I think I paid $235 a month, right? I mean, which is basically free, right? That's like it's crazy. And it's funny because I thought it was expensive back then. I hated my landlord. But basically Utah's lagged behind. So the product types are old. There's not a whole lot of new stuff with private bathrooms with their own private bedroom and private bathroom. A lot of the contracts were just school year contracts, right? Which is kind of the telltale sign of, let's call it an undeveloped student housing market or a mom and pop operation. So we were buying and managing properties that we were taking over from mom and pop operators, and they're saying, well, we have 8 months of rent and then we're basically completely vacant for the whole summer. And we thought, well, this is crazy. Look everywhere else in the country, they're doing 12-month contracts because, hey, news flash, there's a mortgage due every single month, for these assets as well. And we started saying, look, we're going to offer a slight discount, but we're doing 12-month contracts now across the board. What that did was smooth out cash flow significantly. And in many cases, it raised the rent roll between 40 and 60%, right? So take your top line, rent roll, multiply it by, let's call it 1.5, while holding expenses more or less the same. You've created a massive amount of value, right? You're looking at NOI jumps, oftentimes in kind of the 80 to 100% NOI increase, almost overnight. And so those were some of our formative home runs, right? And where we just said, okay, like let's figure this out. Let's be analytical about this in ways that people are not locally, or the vast majority of people are. And our name got out there, right? People were saying these guys do a great job, and they increased revenue quite a bit. They trimmed expenses. They negotiated bulk deals because they were putting together a portfolio. And all of a sudden, I maybe 2 or 3 years later, we just couldn't keep up. We were getting phone calls left and right. I think in 2013 was kind of our breakout year. We went from maybe 3,000 or 4,000 beds to close to 10,000 beds of student housing that year. And with growth also comes a lot of difficulty. Every time we've grown the company quickly, I like to tell the team, "Oh, oops, I'm sorry, I broke the company again." Right? you run into problems, mostly with finding and training and retaining great people.
Yeah, absolutely. Today, what does your management portfolio consist of? If you can give us a breakdown of that.
You bet. So we historically we started in student housing, and that's been a great niche for us. It allowed us to scale nationally, as well as to Canada and Brazil, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But we've scaled up to about 27,000 beds of student housing. We have about another 8,000 units of multifamily right now, and so we're about 35,000 leases total on the management company side. About a third of that portfolio is what we would call owned, right? So it's either our own acquisitions or a joint venture where we're co-GPs with other entities, other partners. It's actually an interesting way to get into that through management. I had some concerns early on in my career where I said, okay, well, I'm managing, let's call it 5 or 6 assets for this great group. Are they going to be upset if I go buy a 200, bed deal in one of their markets? And what we found was, well, why don't we just say, hey, we found a great deal. We'd love to bring in half the money or even more. Do you want to work with us on that? And they say, oh, we love the idea. You have skin in the game. Let's work together on a joint venture basis. You can get your own GP economics from the money that you raise. We get ours. Everyone's happy. Now we're partners. And that's how some of our early deals came together, with some of those great third-party clients saying, hey, let's team up on some acquisitions as well.
Do you feel like that's unique in your space to have the property management company be part of the general partnership on an acquisition?
Yeah, I feel like it is somewhat unique in the sense that most firms of our size are owned either by a fund or they're owned by a private equity group. In fact, I think with only 1 or 2 exceptions, the top 8 or 10 groups in the student housing space are not owned by, their employees, right? Redstone, you can fit all the owners. Well, there's 2 of us now. So it's very, very interesting in that we have a lot of flexibility to do partnerships with whoever we like. And generally when we bring it up, when we really like a group and say, wow, these guys are really good at finding deals, or they're really good at supporting the CapEx and the remodeling that we're doing. We've had a lot of success partnering with 5 or 6 of these different groups. So yeah, I do think it is somewhat unique in our space to have those types of joint ventures with so many different groups.
That's great. Real quick, before we sort of shift gears, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing on the property management side of things today in the market that we're in?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely on the people side, right? So let me just, kind of lay out a challenge here. We're in Utah County. There's a lot of great new tech business going in, right? And these are venture capital funded firms. And so a lot of times they can offer, phenomenal packages, right, to employees. And so we're saying, okay, we've got someone who is a great manager, right? A great community manager. If they choose, they can probably go out and find a very competitive pay package working for one of these tech companies. Now, the flip side of that for some of the tech companies is, a lot of times that new round of financing doesn't come in. We've been a profitable business since day one, right? I was recently asked by one of our team members who just come on board, hey, what's your burn rate on cash? I'm like, I don't know, negative infinity, right? Like we are profitable every single month, and these are cash flowing assets. That's the purpose, right? Is that every single one of these assets cash flows every single month. I can tell you generally within 0.5% what our revenue will be next month. So I think it's finding people that really, it's their passion to serve people, right? And be in front of their residents on a day-to-day basis. I think it's finding those people that are passionate about having kind of something of their own, right, to run. Someone who says, look, I'm going to take this 6-acre project with 700 people living here, and look, I'm mayor of this town now, right? Like, and they do a great job, and they create just these beautiful relationships, and they love running their teams. And so I think it's finding those types of people that are looking for that is more of a career rather than just kind of a stepping stone to something else.
That's great. So I want to shift gears a little bit. I'd like to talk a little bit about the property manager investor relationship.
Sure.
And so if you can, maybe let's start off by just give me a description of, let's say your typical client, your typical asset owner who has chosen you to represent them and to manage their asset.
Yeah, I'd say on average, it's someone who is either with a fund. So we have a lot of fund clients. We have a lot of private equity clients where maybe it's not necessarily a dedicated fund, but they have some type of discretionary capital to spend. Or we have a handful that are syndicators, right? So they're out looking for deals, and they're putting together deals, and then they bring us in to help with the due diligence, to help them with their budgets, to help them with their pro formas, to help them with their capital expenditure plans, and kind of, hey, can we really get rents to here if we spend X, that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, most of these people are people we've worked with for a very long time. On the management side, we're actually introducing very few new relationships. We're kind of just going very deep with the existing relationships that we do currently have.
So let's talk more about the majority of our listeners are going to be more on the syndication side of things. Let's talk about what should a syndicator look for in a property management group that they want to hire to manage an asset, especially if they're out of state. Let's say that someone is looking to come in here to Utah, invest in a property here in Utah, they're out of state. What should they be looking for in the property management company they hire?
Yeah, that's a great question. A couple of things. Number one, I would say would be track record in those markets. It's really interesting. At the end of the day, real estate is a local business. And we've had some interesting experiences where, for example, we've gone into some of our first forays, right, out of state. Were tough because you're saying, okay, we're awesome here, but that doesn't necessarily translate immediately to a brand new market that you don't know well, vendors that you don't know well. You don't have all the relationships set up for that kind of success. So it takes time to develop a market presence. It takes time to develop market dominance, right? We've got a handful of markets in the Intermountain West where we have a 70 or 80% plus market share on managing assets, both first and third party. And it just takes a long time to get to that point. So going to a brand new market sometimes, particularly if you're not close, can be a tough thing. So that's one thing that I would look at. In fact, we actually have some assets in Florida where we don't manage them ourselves. We've hired out a third party group, and the reason is, look, this group has a massive market share here. They do a good job. I know them. I respect them. I've seen their work. And so, yeah, we're not going to take this one in-house, and they do an awesome job at The second thing that I would say, well, I guess we kind of talked a little bit about, market familiarity, but I would go in on a deep dive with their actual track record, right? Show me a track record of increasing NOI, right? Another thing is reporting. A lot of people can be shocked at, look, this is the level of reports that we're getting. This is crazy. And, several months into the relationship, and maybe their software can't produce that type of report. Maybe they don't have the sophistication in-house to build those types of reports custom. So I would look at some kind of sophistication there to put out adequate, timely and accurate reporting, as well as really understand their history of creating value. When we get interviewed by some of the national companies, I think the best practices would be, look, send us a detailed list of what you've done. Send us, some anonymized financials and paint the picture for us on how you're creating NOI in a similar situation. Actually show me the financials, right? And really just come out and do due diligence on the company. So they'll come in and they'll spend a day at our office, right, meeting the different people. Do you have a fully built out marketing team? What's your admin and your HR look like? Is your finance team going to do a good job for us? Okay, what happens if a manager quits, out of state? How are you guys going to handle that? Do you have kind of a parachute team that can jump on a plane, in the next 2 hours and go and solve some kind of a problem? So those are things that I would look for. And some of those things require scale on the management team, but not necessarily. Some of our best work we've ever done were from the years of 2010 to 2013. And, they were in the local markets, but, we were deadly effective with what we did.
That's great. And let's flip the coin there. What is it? Most of your relationships are set in place at this point. You mentioned you're not taking on many new clients. That being
Right.
said, what would you be looking for in a syndication group that had an interest in purchasing an asset here and hiring and partnering with you on a project?
Sure. That's a great question. It's interesting. Internally, markets develop within the company. Who wants to work with which clients, and then which clients want to work with which of our team members. And I would say that the best practices for asset managers or for syndicators would be really just an analytical approach, right? I had a client tell me recently, or maybe a year ago, they said, well, we want, I guess what we're looking for is absolutely zero surprises across the board. And I kind of, I know what they're saying. I know what they're saying, but multifamily housing, and especially student housing, that's all it is surprises. You're creating a system, right? And you're creating process and procedure to deal with the chaos. There's so many different things that have to go right. And until they go wrong, you don't really think about them. So I would say an analytical approach, kind of an even-keeled personality is a really big plus. Responsiveness is absolutely huge. I think speaking with some of our colleagues that also do some third-party management, if you send off a report and you never get any kind of feedback on it until something goes wrong, and you say, guys, we've been saying this for 4 months, right? So the best practice really for an asset of considerable size would be have a weekly call, right? Send a weekly report as the management firm to the ownership, and have a weekly call. It can be 10 minutes, and your agenda is your weekly report, and just go over things and say, look, there's no surprises. Let's get the good, bad, and ugly out in front of us, and let's figure out and game plan what are our next renovations. How are we not going to get behind on maintenance items? Are we needing to make upgrades in order to drive rents and NOI? Those sorts of things need to be an ongoing, constant dialogue, rather than kind of triaging something every 6 months, right? Oh my gosh, we didn't get the rents that we wanted to. What the heck happened? Well, we never did the renovations because we never got approvals for X, Y, and Z. It's very, very, very easy for the communication to go off the rails.
Yeah, that's great. Consistent communication between both parties, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's talk. I want to shift gears. What's great about you is that not only are you an expert in your space, but you also believe in the asset and you're an active investor yourself.
Yes.
And so let's shift gears and talk about the early years in one of your first acquisitions, if you're okay talking about that.
You bet. So I mentioned to you that we had a number of really early successes on the management side. 2010 to 2012, 2013. It felt like, and look, obviously there are some economic tailwinds, right? I can't just claim like, oh, we just slaughtered it and we were awesome because we're so great. These are times when not a lot of people are building, right? So the supply most markets are somewhat supply constrained. People are starting to move out of their parents' basements, back out into civilization, and find their own places to live. And so these are really, really good years for rental growth, and still you could find reasonably good deals. We've been co-investing with a number of clients where they'd say, hey, we're buying this. How much do you guys want to put in? And at the time it was like, oh man, I'm going to scrape together 25 grand or something, or 50 grand and throw it into this deal. And they kind of chuckle and be like, cool, enjoy your like 50-cent distribution, right? But we started to look really deeply in some of our local markets. And we were able to find a couple of deals. The one that I'm thinking of, our actual first syndication that was not part of a joint venture or wasn't part of some kind of co-GP arrangement, was a deal called Canyonlands in St. George, Utah. And it's right next to Dixie State University. At the time, Dixie State was, I think, 7,000 or so students. Now they're right around 10,000 in terms of enrollment. And we looked at it and we said, look, it looks cheap on kind of a price per pound basis, right? And which you have to be careful with. I think that a lot of people will look at one market and say, oh my gosh, it's this much per unit or this much per bed. Let's go out into the farm fields somewhere and find some random, community college and let's buy something that's a little bit cheaper. Follow the demand, right? But what we did right was we knew that the school was growing. We understood their plans. They currently have, I think, a set of quite visionary leaders there at Dixie State that are looking to expand their programs. And we put it under contract. And that was scary, right? So, I mean,
can I back you up just a little bit? Sorry to interrupt,
yeah,
but
no, go ahead.
I'm curious about the acquisition. How did you source the deal? Was it on market? Was it off market? Was it a relationship?
Sure.
How did you source the deal?
Yeah, so this one we knew about it off market, and this is pretty common, right? So you'll have a pocket listing from a broker, and they'll say, hey, we know that you're in this space. We know that you guys are experts in this market or this niche. I've got a deal coming up. And you say, great. Can we tie it up? Here's an LOI. Let us know what you need from us right now. And more often than not, that pocket listing turns into a little bit more of a real listing, or at least let's at least say, look, it's not secret, right? So we did get into a little bit of a competitive bid situation on it. We actually did not get awarded the deal originally. Somebody else was awarded the deal, and they ended up dropping out. So maybe 4 months after we knew about it, they called back and said, okay, let's do this. We're ready to go with you guys. So yeah, we kind of nervously reissued our LOI. We figured out a PSA, had our attorneys draft that up. Stalled on it a little bit because I was like, oh man, I've got to come up with 100 grand of earnest money here. This is scary. And on those first deals, it's really a leap of faith. It really is. You're worried about, oh my gosh, I can't lose 100 grand of earnest money if this thing goes bust, right? And lots of things are going across your mind. So one hiccup that we had there that was a little bit scary was we chopped the debt. And we were all assuming, look, non-recourse debt, agency, Fannie or Freddie type loans. And they came back and said, look, your school's just too small. We want minimum 8,000 enrollment. You've got 7,000. We think it's growing. We like the economics. And it's funny because I'm just like, guys, this is crazy. This is so much so much safer of an investment than half these other schools where you're doing deals, just because of how the urban infill nature of around this particular university. But basically, the non-recourse debt options pulled out. And so what we're left with was, okay, I guess we're going to a local bank. And as you know, most local banks are not super keen on non-recourse financing. So here we are, right? I'm 30 years old, and I'm saying, okay, I need to get, you know, a $6 or $7 million loan, full recourse, and these guys are going to have to buy off on my financial statement. You know, newsflash, at 30, I'm not worth, you know, $8 million or $6 million that they're going to want to see. So yeah, our group, we kind of banded together, and one of my partners here at Redstone, and then a couple of actual local brokers that we've done a lot of work with. We said, okay, between us, I think we've got the liquidity and net worth that the bank wants. We put together, you know, a great model and a deck, and we shot it out, and I could not believe how quickly the capital was raised. And that is probably one thing about the operations side, is that investors want to see the same thing. They want to see track record. And I think that a lot of them viewed us as saying, look, you guys have been running, at this point, I think we were 15, maybe 13 or 15,000 beds. And so no one could tell us, you don't know what you're doing, right? We've been in tough situations before. We've done, you know, at this point, probably 10 or 15 you know, total remodels, total renovations of apartment complexes. We knew our stuff on the operations side, right? But yeah, we raised the capital probably within 2 days. It was incredible. We ended up being, I think, 2.5x oversubscribed on that particular deal.
Do you mind sharing what you needed to raise?
I think it was a just under 2 million to get that deal done. We actually got the seller to carry back about 1.25 million. The bank was also willing to fund all of the renovations, dollar for dollar. All in all, it was a really cool capital stack between the bank funding the renovations, the seller carry, and those investors have just been so good to us. They've been, you know, most of them have been back, I'd say, in 4, 5, 6 deals ever since. And actually, I believe this week, if not next week, we're closing on a refinance of that deal, non-recourse. So we will get out of that original bank loan. It was successful, the acquisition, and we're looking at either most likely a full return of capital with a cash out refinance. So kind of a fun, you know, update to our very first deal.
Yeah, that's great. What was the timeline on that?
In terms of when this was?
When did you acquire it, and now you're doing the refi?
Yeah, I believe that was in 2014 that we were doing that acquisition. So, you know, we are, you know, we are a little bit later at this point, but looking at some really attractive financing in order to get that deal refied and return some capital to our investors. And the school's done exactly what we thought. I mean, it's been fantastic. Now, we learned a lot, right? Our first renovation on this deal, where it was purely us and no one else is kind of checking our notes, I think we went a little light on the renovation. We could have got rents up a little bit more. And one of the most memorable things that happened, I think we closed on it maybe a week before. And the broker involved in the deal, he calls me up one day and he says, hey, your building's on fire. And, and I think that, I think we actually had not cut the check yet for the insurance. It was bound, but like, like it had not been cashed. And I just thought, no, this is not happening right now. And of course, you know, this is a small town or small-ish town, right? St. George. And so the entire fire brigade shows up and they're kicking doors down and like chopping stuff and doing like barrel rolls on the lawn. Like they're really, really excited about this. And the entire building just got absolutely worked. I mean, I think we lost 3 units entirely, but that was just, it's one of those things where you're just kind of laughing. You know, luckily nobody was harmed, right? I mean, that's the most important thing. So that was I would say expect
That's
it, right? It's going to be tough. Your first one, expect your building to light on fire after, after you've owned it
I
for a
was
couple
just
of
gonna
years.
say that is one of those things that you can't plan for. That's for sure.
No, and you just kind of laugh and say, all right, universe, what else you got? We lit the building on fire. What else can we do here?
Is there anything specific that you felt like you learned through that one of the first acquisitions, that acquisition that has helped you on your investment journey so far?
Yeah, I think one thing that's really helped us is we're just super, super, super transparent and straight up with everybody on the acquisition side. And I have noticed, through some of my own mistakes, as well as being part of other JV groups that are doing acquisitions, when you hide the ball, it just makes everybody upset, right? So if the broker's saying, hey, what's the source of your capital, right? And if you say, oh, I have a rich, billionaire from Monaco who's currently on his yacht, and no, you can't talk to him, and I can't tell you his name, right? They're not going to be super thrilled with that. In just say, yeah, we don't have it yet. We're currently raising the money. And, here's our track record of doing that, or we haven't selected our capital partner yet. Just be super straight up. Same thing with the debt side. Hey, how's the loan coming on? Oh, it's supposed to close tomorrow. No, it's not. It's going to be 3 weeks, and set those expectations up front. One of our most valuable sources of new acquisitions have been those that touch every one of these transactions, right? So our mortgage brokers, right? Certainly the real estate brokers. There's probably 5 or 6 real estate brokers in Utah and Idaho in kind of our local backyard that do 80 or 90% of the transactions. And almost all of those individuals are partners with us in some way. And just being really straight up with them and really respectful to them and treating them like the valuable partners that they are in getting deals done, it really pays dividends. And then all of a sudden you're hearing about their pocket listings, very, very early on in the deal. You're friends with them. You're not talking down to them. They say, hey, I'd love to roll my commission into this deal. Would you allow me? Of course we would. We're honored, that you'd want to come along this journey with us. So I think just being straight up, being a good person, it's not super complicated. Everyone's got war stories where they're just dealing with an absolute psychopath on the other side. And that's the person you don't want to be, right? You don't want to build that reputation of not getting deals done that you say you'll get done, B, lying about it, and then C, just kind of being a jerk. Just say what you'll do and do what you'll say. Wait, that's opposite. I messed that up. I think I'm supposed to say, do what you say and say what you'll do. There you go.
There you go. Well, hey, we need to start winding down here, and I want to be respectful of your time. I know you're busy, and
Sure.
you've been gracious enough to come on and spend some time with me.
Yeah,
but before we do wind down, I'm curious about your expansion into Brazil. Can you briefly tell us what that's all about?
Yeah, you bet. So kind of funny story. And I would say that a lot of our experience with Redstone has been kind of serendipitous, where you just get a phone call out of the blue, or you get a random email, or something on LinkedIn is you get an introduction on LinkedIn, and all of a sudden 5 years later, that's now a massive business, through that connection. I had a blind email come in and say, hey, we're high-rise developers from Sao Paulo, Brazil, and we want to talk to you about creating a student housing business in Brazil. And at first, my immediate thought was, sure, right? Like, I'm sure you just need, me to wire some money. And maybe that's terrible for me to instantly go there, but you know how things are. LinkedIn's so spammy these days. We're constantly getting phishing attacks where, people are impersonating me to our accounting team saying, please wire money over here. But they said, hey, we want to come visit you in the US. And I was like, sure, if someone shows up, well, this ought to be interesting, right? And these guys showed up, and they're with a group called Mitre Realty out of Sao Paulo. And they are super legit high-rise developers, just like they said. It's a 3rd or 4th generation a company in Brazil. And how it works down there, it's typically done as condominium complexes. The idea of a for-rent product that a developer would develop and keep is almost unheard of in most of Latin America, actually. And they often actually refer to these as student hotels, just because that they understand the concept a little bit more of owning the entire asset rather than condoing it off and chopping it up and selling it. So we actually started advising with them maybe about 3 years ago. Went down to Brazil a handful of times. They've come up here for training and for relationship building a handful of times. We created a joint venture there. They delivered their first high-rise last year. It's the most successful student housing in Latin America currently. They delivered it 100% full before school started. They did an excellent job of telling the public what student housing is. Keep in mind, this is a culture where you typically live with your parents until you're married, right? So the idea of selling student housing is different. But they've been fantastic partners. We've invested in their fund. We have a joint venture on the operations side down there, and they've done a great job. It's called Share Student Living. If you want to look it up, honestly, they've just absolutely killed it. I tell our U.S. teams, like, I think we could learn some from them in terms of how they really sold the vision of what student housing is.
Well, if we had more time, I'd dive deeper into that. Maybe that's another topic for another day, but
Sure.
That's exciting for you. Well, let's go ahead and wind down. And I've got 3 questions for you. I just want your knee-jerk gut reaction to. You ready?
Got it.
All right. What is the biggest mistake you've made during your apartment investing journey so far?
Oh, I have to say just one. maybe I'll just list off a couple of things as they come to mind. The first one I would say is questioning your mission, right? Questioning what you really want. So I think in college, as the recession hit, I got spooked enough by the slowdown that I temporarily abandoned the path that I wanted to pursue. That was a mistake, right? Did it set me back? I don't really know, right? I have no idea if I would have, found something different or something else if I hadn't done that. But it was a valuable lesson that, it doesn't matter where we're at in the economic cycle to do what you want to do. There's always going to be an excuse, right? Right now, stuff is too expensive, right? Back then, there's no capital and there's no financing. So there's always going to be an excuse to not pursue what you really know deep down that you want to pursue. The second thing was not starting sooner in terms of the investment side. Had we been purchasing, starting in 2009, 2010, as opposed to 2013, 2014, those were prime years to be acquiring commercial real estate, especially multifamily. There's been so much cap rate compression since then. There's been so much rental growth and NOI growth since then that anybody that was purchasing assets during that time frame is absolutely killing it. And I feel like we're a little bit late on that. I spent too much time geeking out in Yardi, right, or renegotiating vendor contracts, or spending 3 days straight on a new acquisition model where we should have just been out buying stuff. Now that might be today as well, right? And so I guess the lesson there is just always be pushing, right? Always be out hunting and trying to find those deals. I think those are my biggest mistakes.
Okay, cool. Well, that's great.
Yeah.
What's the biggest win you've had on your apartment investing journey so far?
Yeah, we've had a handful of really good deals, and I would say a good deal for us looks like kind of a deep value add acquisition. We very quickly increase the rent roll 40, 50, 60%, and then we do a cash out refinance, within, let's call it 24 months. And when you put that into your model, a lot of times your IRRs are just off the charts, and you're getting into your promotes very quickly as a sponsor, and your investors are thrilled, right? I mean, you've returned capital to your investors and you have non-recourse financing in place. What more can you ask for? You continue to get a distribution on capital that you no longer have exposed. Your investors want to re-up with you in the next deal. And you've really, added kind of another home run deal to your portfolio. I think the biggest win that we've ever had was a development that we did actually in St. George, and it shouldn't have been a win. We made a lot of mistakes. our construction company delivered the project. Oh gosh, for the first phase, 1 month late after school started, and the last phase was about 4 months late after school started. And in student housing, you can't just say, "Hey, just kidding," move in a couple weeks later, right? So we had students literally living in hotels every single day until we could move in. And every morning I would look at my phone and there was a notification that said, your Amex card has been billed, I can't even remember what it was. It was like 8 or 9 grand a month, a day, right? In terms of hotels. And I think that's honestly that period. I just actually moved in to a new house. Simultaneously I had been building our dream home as well as this big complex. So construction was not going well. And definitely the closest I've ever been to some type of mental breakdown was paying for 265 students to stay in hotels every single day. And finally, we got them moved in. Out of the blue, Brock Zylstra, who we were talking about earlier, one of our broker friends, he brought us an unsolicited offer at lower than a 5 cap offer, unsolicited, from a 1031 buyer out of California. And we just thought, this is amazing, right? I mean, the project would have been fine as is, but we were behind on delivery, we were over on cost. It still would have penciled just fine, but this allowed us to deliver a great multiple and a great IRR to our investors in a short amount of time. So that was our biggest home run. And we had rolled in our development fees into the deal. We hadn't taken a cent out of the deal. And so our development fees was able to participate in that, that multiple, that equity multiple as well. So it ended up being a great day for everyone.
Yeah, that's great. And lastly, what's your best advice for someone who's just starting their apartment investing journey?
Yeah, I think I've said a couple of things that stand out to me. One would be, if this is what you want to do, do it, right? It's not going to be readily apparent to you when the perfect time is. Again, in the recession, there's going to be challenges in raising capital, right? There may be challenges in putting together financing on the debt side as well. Some of those banks pretty much just, closed their doors or said, yeah, come back to us later, right? In today's market, I hear the exact opposite. Capital is plentiful, both on the debt and the equity side, but just can't find deals. I'm not big enough. There's no way I can find a deal. The way that we dealt with that at Redstone was we just shrunk the size of our pond down until we were a big fish. Now, what I mean by that is, okay, if you're a 3-man group, if you're a single shop, a single guy shop working out of your car, right? How do you become the expert in a certain submarket? Yeah, you may have a hard time winning a 400 unit deal in LA, right? As a guy that's never performed before, as a group that's never raised capital before, that might be tough for you. But you can go knocking doors. Know your local area super, super, super well, right? I mean, real estate's a local game. Go find, that guy that owns the 24 unit deal or the 36 unit deal. Sit down with them. It's probably just a normal dude, living in your town. You can go have lunch with that guy and say, hey, I'd really like to look at, purchasing your asset. And you'll very quickly figure out what the common concerns are. Well, I don't know if I can 1031 the money. I don't want to pay the taxes. My kids are dependent on this. You can work around those challenges, not easily, but you will figure it out. Okay, great. Find the guy a triple net deal, right? But help him buy some medical office space. But you have to do the work, and you have to start somewhere. So I would say shrink the size of your pond, become an expert in some type of niche, and all of a sudden, you'll make a name for yourself. The second thing would be, it's all about relationships. And some of my biggest regrets in Redstone's history are when we've had a relationship go south because of a certain deal, or because we had a disagreement, or because someone couldn't hold their tongue during a frustrating negotiation, or every single deal gets hot at some point, right? Where the title company or the lender or the equity or the sponsor, somebody's going to freak out, right? Keep a level head and take a long-term focus on these relationships. Think, look, I'm going to be working with these people hopefully for 100 deals, not just one. Let's behave accordingly, and don't get greedy, right? Don't try and make all your money on one deal. Look at this as we're going to be doing this for many, many, many years to come, and want to be good people and help everybody to achieve their goals in the deal.
Man, great advice. Well, look, Grant, thank you so much for taking some time, sharing your expertise, your thoughts. How can listeners connect with you and learn more about what you have going on?
Yeah, best way for me is just email. I'm very attentive to my inbox. Everything else, maybe not so much. Grant@redstoneresidential.com is the best contact for me.
Great. We'll have that in the show notes as well. Again, Grant, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it and hope to connect with you real soon.
Thanks so much.